today what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about this beautiful pond that's behind us, because it was not a beautiful pond on this property when we bought it. And when we decided to make the transition or start working on our homestead on this land we bought up here in Northwest Florida, water was something that we wanted. We didn't want a swamp. Obviously, nobody wants a swamp. That's not really usable. But we were hoping for a pond. It was on the top of our list, our priority. We needed to fill dirt for various areas around the property, and it just seemed to make sense to pull from our own land for that fill dirt and to end up with a pond at the end. We had a land clearing guy that we had already used to clear the land here. We went ahead and used him to build the pond. He had some experience with building farm ponds, but it's inexact science if you don't do all the proper drilling and all the proper homework ahead of time. And we didn't do that. We knew that this low area was unusable for us. We couldn't turn it into pasture. It was always going to collect water during rain. So we had two choices. We could fill it in, which would cost money, or we could dig it out and hope for the best. We didn't want to invest, a lifetime of savings in a pond. So it was not inexpensive, but it could have been a lot more expensive if we had done it in different ways. And the guy came in and he stripped off a couple of feet of topsoil and piled that up to the side, and then he started digging. We basically outlined a 100 by 150 area that we wanted to be the top of the pond. We needed more fill dirt, so we had the pond reworked. But on the initial pond dig, it was 100 by 150 with a little hook behind me against that edge, that northern edge. He dug it out, and we were kept hoping that he would hit a spring. And I was fairly confident he would, because there was one area that stayed wet. And we had dug a couple of test holes, and they did not fill with water, but we just went ahead with the project anyway. I hear somebody creeping up on me.
I just wanted to add that another reason, like you said, we thought that there was a spring is when we looked at the property and we first bought it. I've got a video. We've got just thousands of tadpoles because it did stay so wet. So we were confident that the test hole that he dug, even though it didn't hit a spring, there's probably, just more westerly, and then we'll hit a spring. Nope, wasn't the case.
So on the pond, again, 100 by 150 rectangular. And we told him dig down and hopefully he would find water. So he dug it down and he sloped the sides. He bermed up around the edges with the dirt that he had. But we also had several low areas in the property. On our front fence line, there was a fence there when we bought the property, but it had washed out underneath of it because the water comes barreling down off of the paved road that runs along the front of our property. And it was entering our property on a low area behind us at the head of the pond, or the north end of the pond. And it had washed under the fence, almost to the point you could walk under the fence. And we wanted that filled in because we knew we wanted to put a nice front fence, a nice farm style front fence. And we didn't want there to be undulations of the fence. We wanted it to be fairly straight and level. So he hauled a lot of dirt. He had 3 or 4 dump trucks on site that he hired, and he moved, I can't remember the exact number, but 100 comes to mind. So I don't know if it was 100 in one day. I seem to remember one of the dump truck drivers was a really hot rod dump truck driver, and he did 50 loads by himself. So it might have been 100 in a day. I think they moved dirt for 3 days, with one day being the really, really getting it day. So we put a lot of dirt out there on the front, along the front of our paved road where we're going to put our fence. And we had him install a culvert out there that we purchased. We purchased 3 culverts. And then he took some more dirt, and along the east fence line of our property, as part of Deb's walking path, she wanted that walking and ATV trail all the way around the property to get her exercise, to take grandkids on a tour, and just generally kind of enjoy nature of the property without the more developed areas that we have here in the center. And so they had to take a lot of dirt over to a low area there. Took a lot of dirt up for our house pad. And then he also created a 20 by 20 pole barn pad. But the initial pond dig got the dirt for the road bed, the dirt for the front fence, the dirt for the east fence line, the dirt for the pole barn, and the dirt for the house.
Correct. So, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, man.
We actually ran the numbers to, like Brad said earlier, if we wanted to buy dirt, not even to fill in the depressed area, but dirt for the pads, dirt for the house and the shed and the pole barn. The cost of buying dirt was the same as having a pond dug and using our own dirt. So we got the best of both worlds. We used our own resources And we feel like we saved money doing it.
Yeah, I can't remember all the math. It's been 3 years. You know, doing math by standing is not something anyone should do, but there definitely was a significant cost benefit analysis or significant cost savings in using our own dirt. When we redid our pond a little bit about a year later, because we needed dirt, that definitely was the smarter way to go. It was cheaper to use our own dirt than to truck it in. 20-ton load of dirt is about $150 or $180. It just depends on price of fuel and how far away the pit is. So you can see the numbers quickly add up. But the reasons why we wanted a pond, again, we were used to living in the coastal area. We were used to being able to catch fish off our dock. Deb has a paddle boat by the dock. You will see me in the bayou behind our house in a john boat doing various things that people do in john boats. But so we didn't want to totally get away from water. And so having a pond kind of brings a little bit of the coastal to the country. We're hoping that we can get wood ducks established here. We'll build wood duck nesting boxes. We're going to have purple martin houses around the pond, probably have a windmill type thing for an aerator. So those are just things in the future for the aesthetics of the pond and also kind of bringing in that nature. If we can get some wood ducks in here, if we already have cranes that use the pond, we had some, I thought they were whooping cranes, but they were Florida wood storks, which is a pretty rare bird, kind of circling the pond a couple weeks ago. We've got little shorebirds. We got dove that come down here and get water. We have the deer come down here and get water. So the pond is already starting to.
He's good. A dragonfly just landed on Brad's head. I think that's good luck.
We're slowly achieving our goals with the pond. But another thing we'd like to do with the pond is stock it for fish. But we've been hesitant on that because that's not inexpensive. And then you got to start feeding them. You got to worry about aeration of the water. And because we didn't find a spring at the bottom of the pond, even though we dug 2 8-foot deep, and I guess they're 20 feet by 20 feet catfish holes in the bottom of the pond at each corner or each end, and we never found a spring. But the hopeful or the positive thing was at the bottom of one of the catfish holes on the north end, where it's a little bit more sandy and less clay, we did start the teeth of the excavator started getting some really wet soil, and it was a dry year when we dug it. We were hoping with rainwater runoff that we would fill the pond and the clay content of the soil would hold the water. And if it didn't hold all the water, it rained so often in Florida, we figured it would get replenished.
As Brad said, the pond was not holding water. We were surprised at the amount of evaporation the pond actually would decrease in a short amount of time. I remember coming out here, we were excited when the catfish holes were filled and we thought, ooh, we're on our way. It's not going to be long, a couple more rains. And it took forever to get past the point of the catfish holes being filled in. So we had come to the conclusion that, okay, we're going to have to we're going to have to dig a well just to supplement the water because we would like to have fish and we do want to keep them healthy and keep them alive so we can catch them later and eat them. But that's a different story. So we had come to the conclusion that we were going to dig a well. And then
Okay, we're back. We had a little bit of technical difficulty last week. The camera overheated and we didn't realize it till we got home. So we're back here on the property and we want to finish talking about the pond. And the biggest thing I think we have left to talk about is, I think you were talking about evaporation in the last segment. And that was maybe a bit of a surprise to us how much the pond evaporated. Now, I think it's leaking maybe laterally. I don't know that it's leaking vertically down. But with a little bit of maybe leaking through the sides and also the evaporation, it just wouldn't stay full. And it wasn't until last year, 2020, when Hurricane Sally came through Pensacola, and that would put us on the east side of the storm, that the pond completely got full as it is now, and it actually flooded over the road. So that was encouraging for us. We saw that through rainwater collection that we could have a full pond. And we've done a lot of improvements since then that you'll see in upcoming videos where we're continuing to funnel water to the pond. And I guess those efforts are so successful that we now have a new problem which is that the pond is at its peak capacity right now here in August of 2021. We just had Tropical Storm Fred come through, and we've got Hurricane Ida out in the Gulf right now, which looks like it's going to be a New Orleans impact, but that puts us on the east side of the storm. So the pond cannot absorb cannot contain 2 more inches of water, especially since we're bringing water from other areas, which we'll show you as we walk around the pond here in a minute. So we've got a new problem, and that's that we have too much water coming into the pond. So we've got to stabilize that. We got some ideas for stabilizing that, long-term solutions and also some short-term solutions. We've got a pump on order and some pipe, just so we can keep the road passable, so we can keep construction going. Another concern still, because we haven't seen the pond stay full, is how are we going to keep it full, right? If there's not enough rainwater. And an option is definitely to put another well in. But a well to keep a pond full is not cheap. So we put in a well for the house, and that was a 4-inch well. And that cost us somewhere around $6,000, $7,000. It's, we got a bigger tank, a bigger pump, so the costs vary a little bit on a well. But when I talked to the well drilling guy about putting in a well for like irrigation or to keep the pond full, that would require a bigger well, 10, maybe 12-inch well, and roughly a $25,000 well. So we're trying to avoid that. As we can get as much free water, rainwater into the pond, I think it's better water for the pond. That would be a much better alternative. So it's hard to see. You can see the water is actually overflowing the pond right here. But it's hard to see, but in this corner coming up, we put a culvert in the pond. But the purpose of this culvert was to allow water from the paved road to come into the pond. Now there's a lot of water here right now. It's normally not like that. This is normally very dry. You can get in there and mow it. But before we put in this culvert right here, water could not get into the pond from the road. So this would get very, very wet out here, and none of it would go into the pond. So we solved that. We put in a culvert. That water can now get into the pond, and that's a good thing. It puts more water in, but when the pond gets too full, it backs up in this area. And that's not a big deal. This will sink into the ground. These pines will suck up that water. We also collect water up by our gate, our front gate that comes in off the paved road. There's another little culvert that goes under that fence. And this whole west side of the pond is a hill that goes up to our neighbor's house. And of course that hill, water rolls downhill, so we get all his runoff through those pines into 2 culverts that are on that side of the pond. So those are 3 major culverts bringing water into the pond. And in a project that we'll show you later, I have gutters catching all the water from the 2 buildings up there, the pole barn and the shed, the mega shed as Deb likes to call it. And that brings water in the pond with a 6-inch pipe. And that's a good thing, but where does water go when the pond is too full? So over by Deb, maybe even closer to the pole barn, so maybe 50 feet behind her, we're thinking about putting an overflow pipe in, and that pipe will go across the pasture. From that cedar tree to the east or to the left, the property slopes away. So if we can get a pipe that goes through that little hill there, we can get water that goes down into the lower areas of the property. So that's the plan. That's the long-term plan. The short-term plan I mentioned earlier is to get a pump and just pump this thing down a couple feet, 2 or 3 feet when it gets this full, just to keep the road passable.
So that was just a recap on the pond. Like Brad said, everything here is a work in progress. The pond is also a work in progress, but it has come a long way in what seems like a short amount of time. And to us, to go from having it low and wondering if it was going to hold water to where we are now to figure out what to do with the overflow is a good problem to have.